Virginia Congressman Bob Wittman. Congressman, thank you for driving 2 hours in the snow to be here. Do you wish that more members of Congress had perhaps followed your lead and followed Congressman Garamendi's lead and stayed here in Washington while the government continues to be shut down?
Absolutely. We need to be here working on this issue, which is in the forefront now. With the government being shut down, people expect their government to work and get things done. In fact, on Friday, I asked Speaker Pelosi to keep us in session, sent her a letter and said, we have the business of the nation to do. The people that have sent us here expect us to get the job done. They expect us to find common ground. They see, as you've seen from the most recent numbers, there's a realization that there is a crisis at the border. The Washington Post pointed it out, the humanitarian crisis that are there. Families and children are being affected by this. The drugs that pour across the border, all those things need to be taken care of. Our members of Congress should be here in town getting things done.
But since you bring up the Washington Post and ABC News also put out a poll today saying that the majority of Americans blame the GOP, not Democrats, for this shutdown. Are you worried about the political ramifications if this shutdown continues to drag on?
There's also within that poll a increasing realization by the American public that there is a crisis at the border. And I think they look at Congress and said both sides need to be at the table getting things done, finding that common ground, and that the president is correct. The Congress needs to solve this. This is an issue that is critical to a family that's been affected by drugs, opioid overdose. We look at the opioids pouring across the border, the families that are down there whose children are being affected by this. Those are things the American people expect us to do, and all you have to do is to look at, too, what is now mounting coming our way. Another caravan being put together in Honduras. Those things are critical, and people want us to get those things done.
Whatever compromise that Congress comes up with, President Trump is going to have to sign it, and it remains very unclear what sort of compromise he'd be willing to sign off on, what sort of concessions he would make. I want you to listen to something that Democratic Senator Chris Coons said just a few hours ago on Fox News Sunday.
One of the challenges of negotiating with President Trump, as Lindsey Graham knows better than anyone else, is I feel like I've signed up for the Trump of the Day Club. I think the president should test that by making it clear what concessions and what compromise he's willing to put forward.
So do you think that President Trump should be more clear about what concessions he's willing to make?
I think it's critical that leadership in the House and Senate sit down with the president, with his staff, and go through line by line those things that need to be accomplished, the dollars that need to go toward barrier construction, the other elements as part of that, what you call that barrier, the other things of what need to happen with immigration reform. I think you sit in the room, you go through that. The president's already indicated he thought in 45 minutes to an hour you could sit down, find that common ground, and get it done. I think that's the way you come up.
But it hasn't happened so far. I mean, one side is going to have to give at some point. How do you see this playing out? I mean, we're in the longest shutdown ever in U.S. history, and neither side is budging.
Kristen, you're correct, and we can't forget, too, that this impacts the lives of federal employees. It affects their families. They expect us to get this job done. They expect rational, reasonable people to sit down and do this. The only way that this gets done is for everyone to sit down in the room, those people in the leadership positions, as well as the president.
Quite a few times in the Situation Room.
That's right. They got to do it again. They got to do it again. I think it's incumbent that Congress act. And I know the president's reaching a frustration point to say, hey, if you don't, I'm going to go ahead and take action. I'll declare a national emergency. I still believe it's Congress's responsibility to get this done.
So President Trump said yesterday on Twitter that he has a plan to end this shutdown. Do you know what that plan is?
He has not divulged it to us, but I know he is ultimately going to take action with this. He's going to give Congress every opportunity, but ultimately he is going to act.
And finally, do you think that the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, he has been criticized by Democrats for not allowing the Senate to vote on the appropriations bills that would open up at least some of these shuttered agencies. Do you think that the Senate Majority Leader should allow the Senate to vote on these bills?
Well, Senate Majority Leader has been very clear. He is not going to bring any bill to the floor unless he's assured that it's something that the president will sign into law. So I think that's good so that you don't go through a lot of back and forth about passing bills and then having the president veto it.
Why not just go ahead and vote. And if the president vetoes it, the Senate could still come back and override that veto. I mean, these are equal branches of government.
Sure. Well, Kristen, they could certainly do that, but the time that it would take for that to be done, I argue the more timely way to go about it is to have everybody sit down in a room, determine what will the president sign into law, and not go through the back and forth, which essentially becomes a political exercise rather than a true effort to solve the problem.
Well, Congressman, I like your optimism.
Yes.
Hopefully the parties can all get together in one room.
Yes.
And sort this out. We'll see. Thank you so much, Congressman, for coming on.